All right, that was the noise that says we are recording. Um, First off, thank you, especially considering you have an auditor on site right now.
Fun.
Yes, we truly appreciate
This
this.
this is um, we're intensely grateful. I'm Andi Guerrero. I'm a principal at an early childhood campus in Crystal City ISD, and
I'm Elsa Gomez. I'm a vice principal at a junior high campus at Crystal City ISD.
I started out at junior high. It takes a special person. I love those kids. I know I'm
It
crazy.
really does.
um, so you were an educator before you went into the
Yes, I actually started as an English teacher, seventh grade. I then moved to special, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Then I moved to special ed. I taught special ed for, I don't know, lots of years. Here he is. Eventually became special ed director, moved to federal programs and school improvement, then to HR, and somehow I ended up here as CFO. I think Dr. Harrell had a weak moment or something. I don't know.
We still have not found a place that these two ships have met well.
I told him I think he's trying to push me out the door, but he's just too nice to say it. So anyway, so that's my story. I've been in this position since July-ish this year, July. So yeah, brand new. I'll try to answer all of your questions, but you may get some I don't know for sure.
which is perfectly acceptable. Everybody has room for growth. All right, we do have some scripted questions, but we're aspiring to be superintendent, so we may have missed some stuff, and we will seek your knowledge in any way you can help us. Our first question is, what are the qualities that you feel a school chief financial officer should possess in order to be successful in their job?
Okay, so attention to detail, absolutely. Um, the ability to put in place processes that that will ensure that attention to detail. Um, a willingness to always keep students at the forefront. That's why we're here, even when all we do is count fees. But yes, I think those things are the most important.
Thank you.
Can you provide an overview of your position and the roles, duties, and responsibilities of a CFO in education?
Okay, so I don't think I heard all of that. The roles and responsibilities.
Yes, the roles, duties, and responsibilities of a CFO in education.
Okay, so other than the usual, as any director, oversee the department, that sort of thing. A CFO really has to stay abreast of all the changes that come from Austin regarding school finance. We've had lots and lots of them. They need to stay abreast of all the federal mandates as well as state, and have a little bit of a crystal ball and try to project what's going to come next, and a willingness to ask for help. I don't know of any CFOs that don't still ask the experts. I'm sure there are some out there, but I think people like Mo Casey and those consultants help everyone. So a willingness to learn, continually learn. Yeah. So preparing the budget for specific duties, preparing the budget, monitoring the budget, ensuring that expenditures are happening in the correct way, that they benefit students, that we have some internal controls of the money, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and some things she probably didn't say or is the oversight to the campus budgets.
Yes.
And the workflow and the approval process. One of the things that is big is my wife's ringtone. You hear it? Hang on, I'll be right there, okay? All right. A lot of times principals don't know what they can spend local money on, what they can spend federal money on, what they can spend state comp money on. And so that oversight piece, she's real good at. She knows what fits in what bucket. And through the years of being in special ed and through different areas, she doesn't give herself enough credit to say, that's a big piece when you get to this level. At the principal level, if you're like me, I used to go through, hey, this line's got money, just use it. But there's always a run and a reason behind, title is one, can I spend title on it, state comp, especially at whatever the case may be, is always a big piece. And also the oversight for the budget and making sure your different functions are on pace to zero out at the end of the year. That, this was on pace to zero out in 10 months, we've got a problem here. Or, this was not being spent fast enough and we're gonna end up only using 50% of it. What's changed? So that eye for detail, one of the things she said earlier, the eye for detail, but what does that entail? That entails setting up processes to manage the money throughout the school year and all the different functions. And Esther has just played a huge card in the deck that just makes it even that much more monumental. So,
one thing that I didn't mention, and that reminds me, what qualities do you look for? What skills do you need? One of them is we're continually teaching, and that's a perfect example. We may have a new principal and like he said, they say, oh, $199, that's local. Well, not if it's a big 30, that's state comp. So I still teach. I just teach big people instead of little, and I'm just gonna say big people are harder. Just gonna put that out there. Little people are easier. But that's huge. We continually, we'll get a new principal secretary who does the budget. So, that's helping them understand the reasoning. I'm not just saying no for fun. I'm saying, let's try this instead. So that's huge. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so my next question is kind of a two-parter. Could you provide an overview of the financial blueprint for a school district? By that, where are the majority of dollars in your school district received from, and where do you feel that the majority is spent?
So I can tell you that over 85% of our budget is spent on personnel. So I think that's common with any district. We do get some money from the local tax assessment. Most of it, a bigger amount comes from the state, and then of course the federal is the icing. So that's how we like to explain our state and local is the cake, and the federal is the icing. But yeah, most of our money is spent on personnel.
So major expenses, other than because I do get to see my 6119s and a lot of little line items for TRS, workman's comp, other than staff and fringes, salaries. What else are the major expenses within a school district that you need to make sure you have money allocated for?
So maintenance and operations always. Our school building is far, some people would call them historical. They're old. They're just old. And they take a lot of repairs and maintenance. So
they're not very energy efficient. So our electrical bill, water and gas is pretty high too. Higher than it should, probably is for most, just because they're very energy efficient.
Yeah. So that's one that we make sure that we have enough money in the budget to cover those repairs and maintenance. Transportation, of course, is always, you hear that, oh, well, you get money from the state. It is a very, very small amount compared to what we spend for transportation. So yeah, those are, and of course, instructional supplies, making sure teachers have what they need. I mean, nothing is more frustrating than not getting teachers what they need, and really all employees. I mean, one of my pet peeves is we hold up production because we ran out of paper clips. So, things like that, you just want to make sure that they've got enough money.
Thank you.
Could you elaborate upon the different sources of funding that a school district utilizes, such as the local, state, federal, private grant, and the different requirements of using each kinds of dollars?
Okay, so your local money, of course, and state money are what we say the easiest to spend. There's less, of course, red tape. State comp ed and those allotments, state comp, CTE, special ed, those state allotments, the ones with the picks, the 30, the 22. Those have requirements that they can be spent on. They are supposed to be in addition. I mean, they're supposed to be spent directly, a percentage of them on that program for those students. Different percentages, they comp is 55%. Anyway, according to program, they're different. So they've got a few more requirements. Federal, goodness gracious, just lots. Lots and lots of requirements. So for the most part, they must be supplemental. You can't pay for things that we're required to provide. I can't build a new program with my new building with my Title I money. Those sorts of things. There's also a compliance component, of course, and random audits. So same with ESSER. It is much like Title I, not quite as strict. However, they've told us expect lots more audits. So, so the thing with federal grants is you have to really be true to those processes. We have multi levels of approvals for purchase orders, and one of them is to make sure that the activity is in the SIP. One of them is to make sure that the activity is allowable. So there are just several layers of compliance that we start. We didn't always do that, but in the last 4 or 5 years, we started doing that.
Okay.
Oh,
Did that answer? I may have gone.
Yeah.
No,
Not just
you did great.
okay. So are all of these funds received at the same time, or how do you ensure that they're allocated properly?
Okay, so they are not received at the same time.
Okay.
So state funds come in on a more regular basis, but the federal grants are a reimbursement. So, for instance, if we get $2 million in Title I, that doesn't mean $2 million are deposited into our bank account. What that means is we can spend $2 million. So what we do for our federal grants is we budget them. We budget the total amount. And then as it's spent each month, we draw down from TEA. So if we spent $300,000 this month, that's what would hit our bank. So we don't get the whole amount, we just get as we spend.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Does your district have or develop a year-long I'm going to speak teacher talk because it makes sense to me. A year-long pacing guide. I guess I would call it a school finance planning calendar. Like we need to make sure in November we do this, in December we do this.
So TASPO, which is an organization much like TASA, but it's for school business officials, they publish every year a calendar. And it has all of those tasks to help remember. And it is, it's long, it's a lot, but it does keep you on track that way. As far as, I know that Dr. Harrell gets us, at Region 20, there's a superintendent's calendar that's a physical, like a planner. And it also has by program the things to remember that are due that month. So that helps a lot. I should say in the budgeting process though, we develop our own calendar. So we say when we're going to start the budgeting process and that sort of thing. So it's a mixture of both.
Okay, well, that budgeting process, as far as creating the budget and getting it approved, right? That's what you're.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
And that budgeting process actually probably starts, somewhat you're making notes right now, but it probably in earnest, it begins probably January or February with principal talks about staffing. What you also look at is the progression of grade levels. Sometimes what you'll see is some grade levels are carrying 50 more kids than other grade levels. So when that second grade of 350 goes to that third grade where we only had 275, now are you going to move 3 teachers? Are you going to hire 3 teachers? What's coming in? But as Beth said, with staffing being 85%, 85% of your budget, you know, you got to start planning awfully early to understand what you're going to propose to the board. So staffing takes both times. It really does.
Yeah.
And those principal talks and those teacher talks about who's going where, what's those grade levels rolling like from one grade level to the next. What do we need to do to prepare for those as well? And the same on the special ed side. When some of your FLS kids, you'll find that all in one class you've got 10, and the next class you got 3. So how do you prepare the next campus that's going to receive them for that reception?
makes sense. I know, I guess I'm speaking more towards like what I'm familiar with as far as budget workshops and such with the school board. When do you suggest you start having those conversations about the full budget development? I think you're saying January is about where you start with central office and the superintendent and campus principals looking at the big picture. But when do you involve the board in the timelines and the conversations?
So we like to involve them as early as we can. Not until we kind of have an idea of what the personnel is going to look like once the staffing meetings are done, that sort of thing. We will have our first budget workshop with the board either late May, usually late May, then have another one, at least one in June, one or maybe 2 in July, and then we adopt our budget in August. We have to have our adopted by August 31st. So some of those, the first one is very preliminary. Just, last year it was, hey, these are the things that are going to impact budget. We didn't know coming out, we didn't have all the information out of Austin, imagine that. So we just kind of said, hey, this is coming, but we don't know what it is. So just to kind of keep them informed. We also had a budget committee. A couple of board members that we ran things by outside of the board meeting.
So we had 3 board members on our budget subcommittee. And we met here in this room, and whiteboarded things out, gave us some reports. So 3 of your 7 board members have already pretty much seen and gave you guidance. And through that process, that's one of the things that we ask our board to do. That's when you talk about raise. Are we looking at 1%, 2%, 3%, or time so tough this time around? We're not going to do raises other than the step increases for people who are on step. And then also the fringe benefits. Are we going to increase our portion of pay towards the insurance for employees? And that's really the only other fringe benefit we get. We get a life insurance policy on the person's behalf, but I think we're paying $3.25 towards insurance for an employee, and then the raises or what other options that may come.
Yeah, they can give us, usually in the course of those meetings, they will say, we want to look at this 1.5%, and we want to look at the 3%. So then when we come back to the next one, we have all those calculations with our current staff, exactly what the impact to budget would be.
Do you project, because I'm assuming, and I don't mean to be rude, that you're in the same predicament as most of the state when it comes to staffing shortages. So did you project, like, if we were fully staffed, this is what it would look like, or do you just go with the numbers you currently have?
Yeah, we budget at a fully staffed, we budget vacancies in there because our hope is that we get bodies in all of those positions. So we actually budget about the midpoint on those positions. If somebody comes in that's brand new, then we have a little money to play with.
So midpoint is salary schedule.
Yes, midpoint is salary schedule. So we will, for a teacher, we may budget at 10 years of experience.
Okay.
And so if they come in at 1, then that difference, we have a pad of sorts in the budget.
And then I guess my other question, and I'm sorry, Elsa, I know I'm going off script, but the questions are popping in my head as they happen. So,
hey, let them roll.
Have you guys had to shift, or is it about the same with substitutes? Because with the impact of the pandemic, I know as a campus level, we're having to deal with a lot more substitutes than I normally would. So did you have to increase that budget? Did you guys even discuss?
One thing we did with our ESSER money is we hired, we call them COVID subs, and they're paraprofessionals, and they are assigned to that campus for the sole purpose of substitute. And we paid for them with ESSER funds. So that lessens the burden of having to go outside to find those subs and increase our sub budget and ESSER payment.
That is awesome. Permission to share with others.
Today, and they go and support in the classroom.
Yes.
That's phenomenal.
I think it's rare that
they
just have a couple each. High school, I think, has 4 because they're, obviously have more teachers to be out. But yeah, they use them regularly. Yeah.
Yes, as would we. All right. I'm asking for, like, I know that there's a ton of things you have to do 12 months a year. You mentioned August 31st being a critical deadline date. Are there others that, like, you know what, we need to make sure T's are crossed and I's are dotted because this is a non-negotiable timeline?
There are lots of those. The snapshot date for these, our budget should be correct in the system because people pull that. We have to calculate indirect costs. You're familiar with indirect costs for federal grants. So the state says that we can keep a portion of a federal grant to cover administrative, building, that sort of thing. It's usually a very small percentage. That changes each year. The CFO has to submit a workbook, and then TEA tells us what it is. It's usually around 4.5%. But that 4.5% of that grant, you get to keep as local money. So, the indirect cost workbook has to be submitted on a timeline. The audit, the yearly financial audit, has for us, July 1st start. Ours has to be submitted, presented to the board and submitted to the PA by the end of January. So there are several critical, I know I'm leaving out lots of them, but those are the main.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can work on them.
Yeah, our start date is September 1, fiscal start date. And on that calendar, our audit has to be approved in the month of December, really, to make the 18th submission, be submitted to the DA for our audit in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I said July, September 1. I'm on contract. Wrong hat.
Yeah, as far as hard date on the, those are probably the main ones. You know, each district probably has an internal hard dates that they want to have things done and completed by. Personnel being one of them, really. Just so you'll kind of know where you're going in. One thing, and I may have talked about it already, there's a summary of finance that y'all can talk about in a minute. That would be important for y'all to know the summary of finance that the state puts out. And they update that sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. Sometimes it goes 60 days without being updated. But it's the calculation, kind of a best calculation PEA can give you for that moment in time based on your CTE, special ed, enrollment populations that you have in your district. And it fluctuates. Sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes not so much. But that's something a lot of CFOs, CFOs should be looking at often. So.
Yeah, and you can look those up. I was just looking to see I thought anyone could see them, but
I
you
can.
can look those up on TEA's website, or just Google summary of finance TEA.
Paige Maloney at Region 20 gave us the link.
Good.
And I looked it up so that I knew exactly how much I had for early childhood allotment.
Yeah, there you go.
So I can go to the interim superintendent and go, no.
Very with your argument.
That's right. That's right.
Good.
Yeah, so on the summary of finance, there's a legislative prediction and the district prediction, right? Yeah. And they're the same most of the year until after PEEMS, then they start changing.
Yeah, the ADA really impacted.
Yes.
So what are some of the major challenges of your position?
Oh my goodness.
Where do I begin?
I think, with anything, even our budgets at home, making the money spread to cover everything you need. That's one of the challenges, because believe it or not, and a lot of people in the district wouldn't believe this, but I really do want to say yes a lot. I don't sometimes get to, but so we would love to be able to everything that came to us say, sure, let me just put that in your budget. But unfortunately, no, I don't know any district that has that luxury. So that's one of the hardest things is, and I think Cheryl does a really good job of bringing everybody together and kind of trying to prioritize and what's going to impact kids the most. And you have to ask, is this going to make it easier for the adults or for the kids? Or That's a big question. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, of course. And then just sorting through TEA stuff, mandates and changes and complicated school finance. Um, I don't think it's meant to be understood. And so that's a challenge.
Yeah, I don't get golden pennies and copper
Yes.
pennies.
Yeah,
God bless you, you do.
yeah, seems like they're different.
You kind of touched on it, you know, with the audit, and I'm thinking, but can you kind of do a drive-by on the first rating process? Because I do know, like, once the rating comes out, don't you have to present it to the school board as
You
well?
do. You have to have a public hearing to present it. We'll do that at our December board meeting. You have, I think, 2 months after it's published, after it's final. But, that process, it really, there's not a process for the district other than really watching what those indicators are. It's much like, okay, so I always revert to SPED because that was my life for so long. It's much like PBMAS used to be, or your what was it, AEIS, those sorts of things that draw on of lots of information. Part of it's based on our audit. So you really want to watch those things. Some of the indicators, it's just some of them you just have to take like they are. It's just hard to really have an impact there. But some that you can, you want to be cognizant of them. I don't know that for anyone it drives major decisions. I don't know if that would, hey, we're going to lose 2 points on the first rating if we purchase this truck for, that maintenance needs. I don't think it's that, but you are cognizant of those indicators.
Thank you.
A school district has multiple leaders. How do you ensure that full understanding, transparency, and effective communication occurs with the superintendent, directors, campus leaders, and the school board?
I didn't hear the first part. Okay, wait.
Districts have lots of leaders. How do you make sure there's transparency? So I was waiting for that question to come up because that's probably one of the hardest things, Elsa, is everybody thinks everybody else is getting something that I didn't get. It's probably like that brothers and sisters. Why did he get that?
Yeah.
And it's more about what's the analogy of equity and equality? If everybody goes to the doctor with a broken arm and everybody gets an aspirin, that didn't really fix the problem.
Right.
People needed a cast. Anyway, that's probably kind of one of the toughest things is, high school always seems to be getting everything. They got athletics, they get this, and then pre-K they got all the little babies. So you want to make it's middle grade. It seems like it's kind of like they get everything somewhere else. When actually, it's not so much that way, other than a parent's conversations, bringing them in. When we do our teacher talks and planning for the budget, we ask them to bring their initiatives for the next year. And we talk about what is reasonable, what is something they can do out of their own, or what do they actually need money for. You give them voice back in the process. And yeah, sometimes you do got to say no. Sometimes you make a hard yes. And I say a hard yes is, I don't know how we're going to fix it, but that's a great idea, and we need to make sure we fund it somehow. But give them voice throughout that planning process. It's something we did prior to COVID, and Beth has reminded me we hadn't started yet, and I don't know if we'll get started in the next 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, but we had quarterly principal meetings, and we would evaluate their staff, we'd evaluate their, it would be their benchmark data, their teacher data, and also their budget. And that would also be a time for them to say, hey, this isn't operating like we thought it would. We want to make a change. It should be following their campus plan pretty close, but we know what happens. Okay, what I did with my campus plan, I got it done and I put it on the shelf. I never really got it out a whole lot more. But with the principals meetings, we gave them the opportunity to come in and say, have voice in their campus with central office in partnership, and walk away having a better understanding of the need for the next 9 weeks. So unlike that campus plan, we try to do something quarterly so we stay abreast of what's happening on the campus. So also on the teacher side, when it comes to renewals, non-renewals, nothing snuck up on us. There's nothing worse than getting to March or April and say, I don't want this teacher back. Okay, what does that documentation look like? And they say, what documentation? That's going to be a problem. So, try to head off a lot of those as we went through the year. I'm sitting here talking to myself, and we better have those pretty quick.
I think it is. It's really important because it is not a gotcha by any means, but it is just a chance for everybody, number one, for us to learn that, things that are going on the campus that we don't know. But number two, it's great for us to be a sounding board for them and, bounce ideas. And if there are those concerns, like you said about staff, that's huge because we can sit and discuss, okay, are we going to grow? Is this one we need to grow? And how do we do that? And how can we help you? And so it's more about that. And I will say if we know there's a need to help that principal refocus in an area, then that's the time. And also on their spending, more so on the fiscal allotments and the federal money, because you want all that spent at a certain time. So yeah, I think those are really useful. I think we have staffing meetings, formal staffing meetings, that is Dr. Harrell, myself, CNI, special ed, and the principal, yeah, HR / CFO and the principal. And we are very transparent about staffing levels. We have a sheet that outlines the basic school model, and for these grades it's 22 to 1, and for these grades it's 25 to 1, and so it doesn't look, oh look, they have so many teachers, and so that's really transparent too, so that kind of, so everybody knows, we're very open about that.
I could be wrong. I'm aspiring and not A, but to me, transparency and honesty builds trust. And
Absolutely.
trust is a positive thing. I know that you said you one of the topics during your principals meetings, or is it just Dr. Harrell? It's you with all of the directors and the principals, right?
On which now? Sorry?
On these principals meetings that you have, where you touch base.
In our quarterly meetings?
Yes.
Okay, do myself, CFO, and CNI.
Okay.
The deputy super CNI and the principal. That way we're talking staffing, we're talking benchmark, and what we predict for the spring, and what we predict for outcomes at the end of the year, and how we can help that principal with their campus, have those hard conversations about, what, this is year 2 and we're still not getting done. How can we help you help yourself also? So it also helps not only in budgeting, but also on, we all know what we know. We're not hiding anything. Everybody's in it at the same together, but also there are times when you got to make hard choices. And as you said first on, that transparency, the visibility, creates trust, some of the outcomes and some of the decisions, some of the conversations. You know what? We may not like hearing what we're hearing, but you can't argue it. So if I had that conversation once a year, then there'd be very little trust. Everybody would be wondering, what are we doing? What are we doing? How am I doing? And that takes a lot of that out.
So, as the CFO, when you're sitting in those quarterly meetings and you're trying to balance everything from 199 to 160 to 211 to 270 and et cetera, what percentage of the budget are you looking, for each principal to say, hey, or each director even, here's your line item, special education director. I don't think this has ever happened, but you haven't spent any of your money. I don't think that has ever happened. So, do you have like a percentage where you're saying you need to like have this much spent by Christmas break, this much spent by spring break? I mean,
So we do on the federal side, because those are much more critical, but they don't do it in local, we'll go back to the fund balance.
oh, okay.
So, if we were lucky enough to adopt a balanced budget. So we're not as concerned with the local as we are with the federal, but yes, we would, so yes, we look at percentages, but not as much as specific purchases. If they're buying technology, we want it ordered by September.
So back to the timelines that y'all asked earlier, so some of those internal timelines that I was talking about, that's a good point, is we're not going to buy technology for your class in March or April. That should be bought in August or September, especially with that title money it's supposed to be for this year's kids. So that goes back to those quarterly meetings. What do you have? What is your plan? Have you bought it? Have you not? Then you don't need it, or you do need it, and have a problem getting it. We help with that. I've got to run to another board meeting. So I'm gonna give y'all 3 things still to talk about.
Okay.
Preparing for summer school. Always got to have some money back for summer school. Maintenance of the effort, MOE. And the third thing is, you always, if you're a district like ours, where you're going to start school in August, and that's also the month that you're closing your books, it gets a little complicated. Plan well, but also plan for school startups. You got to have some money to start school with. So you'll talk about that. So back to that timeline, in August, you got to have some money to start with, even though we're fixing to close down our books. And you're closing down the previous year, starting a new year, and it gets convoluted. All right, y'all have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carroll.
All right, y'all have a good week next week. Y'all take care.
All right.
Alrighty.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Oh, he gave us some topics. Okay. And it's my, okay. We can bounce off of those. I think my last question was, what kind of strategies or mindset is essential for you to stay motivated and be successful in your role?
A good healthy dose of fear is always good, of getting it wrong, getting anything wrong, so I say that in a joking way, but kind of not. So, I think that for me, I like things to run very seriously. And if it say that we're going to do something, then I expect everyone to do it. Doesn't always work that way. But I think what motivates me is just the opportunity to make things better. Whether it's how we handle purchase orders. Oh, look, we can do this so the principal doesn't have to do 5 steps. That's better. Oh, look, we got everyone to fill out the correct form online and it went through in 30 minutes. That's motivation first. Taking things that are maybe disjointed and making them smoother. Everything we do is about a process. So I'm a big process person, and I know Dr. Harold gets sick of hearing me say it, but you know what? We just need a process for that. So, but that's what it's about. It's setting those things up so you are successful, and that's what motivates you to just keep improving.
All right.
Because
So
we're never going to be perfect in anything. So always room.
I know that applies to me, definitely. So going back to Dr. Harrell's top three, um, I know for us in our school district, we start planning for summer school typically in February.
As a week, yeah.
Okay, so and the part that I see hard as a campus principal, so I'd like to hear like the central office perspective is I'm guesstimating.
Right.
I know my bilingual program. That's a given. I know the pre-K going to K and the K going to 1, but other than that, who I'm going to be bringing and inviting in is going to be determined by typically end of year data.
Right.
So how do you plan? Like, how do you guesstimate how many staff members you're going to need and what hours you're going to run and all the other fiscal costs that are associated with running a summer school program?
I haven't worked directly with with summer school, and there was a time in one of those roles back whenever that was that I did the whole planning. And it's not so different now. Um, and you're right, it's a guesstimate, and we get that from all of the principals. It's one of the things that we talk about in our quarterly meeting. How many kids do you have that are, this far below, and how many are on tier 3 and tier 4, and those are kids that are going to be in summer school. So we start with that. We budget at the beginning of the year for summer school, usually out of state comp ed, maybe some title. We usually fund enrichment programs out of title and remedial programs out of state comp ed. Now we have the ESSER pot too. So, it's going to get really dicey because ESSER is, you have to spend a certain percentage of it on learning loss, but that's the same kid that you're supposed to spend a certain percentage of state comp ed. So it's going to get kind of dicey. I'm not sure how that's all going to shake out, but at any rate, we budget based primarily on what we spent the year before for a remediation. And then knowing that our kids are behind due to pandemic, we add to that because we know that we're going to need either smaller classes or more classes and that sort of thing. I don't know about y'all. We, the last couple of years, have had trouble getting enough teachers to work. We upped their pay. We were paying $30 an hour. We moved it to $50.
Yes, so did we.
And I think a lot of people did. And it did get more people in. So at any rate, that's how we budget. It's a guess at February. It just is.
Okay. Go ahead.
I guess, right, to kind of to close out the interview, we had one more question. What do you wish all aspiring superintendents knew and understood about the business office?
I think that I wish this is hard for me because my superintendent knows a lot about the business office. So, I've not been a CFO for anyone else, so I don't know what it's like when they know him. But so I'm going to imagine that they do nothing. I would want them to attend some business office meetings. And I'm talking about like at the service center or through Chasco, and just really get a grasp on what the requirements and the challenges are. I think I would hope that every superintendent understands that, because I mean that's what makes the wheels turn, right? But I am sure there are some that don't. So that's what I would hope, that they would involve themselves. And Dr. Harrell is really big on, we have weekly finance meetings. He and I, when I was federal programs director and the HR director, it would be him, me, and the CFO. And so we would talk about all these critical things. What's coming up? What are we doing here? What do we, and I will say one thing that I haven't gotten to in my short time here yet is, hey, I need money for. So I told you I'm a planner. So what I want to say is negative ghostwriter, not in the budget. But there are things that come up, and some of those come from him. So I can't really say that. But yeah, so I wasn't really prepared for that every day. But at any rate, I just wish, I think it's good that they know, at least have a foundational knowledge. Yeah.
Got it.
That's fair.
So MOE that he wants me to tell you about, I can tell you real fast. Okay, I'll do that so he said. So MOE is maintenance of effort in special ed, IDME, which is special ed, the federal grant, and with ESSA, which is the Title I federal grant. There is a maintenance of effort requirement. In special ed, that maintenance of effort requirement says your state and local contribution to SPED must never be reduced from what it was the prior year. Never. Unless you meet certain criteria that are really hard to meet, then you can take a voluntary reduction. Okay. So if we spent $2 million last year out of state and local on special education, then we're going to spend $2 million from now on. So you have to monitor as you go that you're spending that. Because if you don't, if this year I only spent 1.5, then they're going to drop my federal grant $500,000. That's how that works.
That's a lot on a special ed director. That's a lot on a special ed director.
It is. It absolutely is. So, not exactly the same under Title I, but much the same. You have to meet the maintenance of effort there. It's not dollar per dollar per se. And there's some different tests. You spend at least the same per student. You spend, that's maintenance of effort. So that's just another thing that we focus
on. Planning when you're trying to close out the budget, but you still know, I mean, I guess I kind of get that because, I'm starting in service and such, and that's when I lean a little bit more heavily on other fund sources that we can before the actual budget kicks in. When I know September 1st is when your fiscal year starts, when do you actually allow directors and principals to spend from the new fiscal year budget? Like, when is it open for? Are you able to start it on September 1st, or does it take?
This year we started September 1st. Yes, not before. This year, I don't even know how we did it, but we did it. Mainly we did it because he was breathing down my neck saying, I really want them to have money September 1st. I was thinking, oh my God, I've never done this. What's going to happen? We did it some way. They did not have access to their federal funds because we didn't have all the notice of grant awards, but they had their local money, at least a portion of it, to start the year. Now, September 1st is too late because our teachers came back August 5th.
I know.
So what we tell them, we usually shut off spending in late April so that we can get all the bills in, get everything closed out. So for campus, other than for summer school, that sort of thing. And normally all the summer school supplies are bought out of district level, so they don't need it campus. So we stopped spending there, but what we tell them is you can't enter any more POs. However, save enough money because in August I'm going to let you buy markers and copy paper and those things that you need for teachers, PD supplies. We're going to let you buy that then.
Okay.
So they either buy it in May or June, which is what we want, and keep it till August, or that's how we do it.
Thank you. I was really trying to keep this, or we were really trying to keep this just at 45 minutes, because especially since you had auditors, which we didn't know when we booked this. But
We didn't either. We didn't have the date. So.
And we're running over, but I cannot thank you enough. And I just want to say, I think it's extremely beneficial to your school district that you are an educator. So you said it once, and it's a statement that's true to my heart. You got to put students first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yes,
And
learned so
don't
much.
underrate yourself.
Well, I appreciate y'all, and I commend you for taking this on. I couldn't do it, but I commend people that do.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all. If you think of something else, just drop me an email or give me a call. Dr. Harold's got, of course, all my contact information, so you're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.